All right, here we go. Episode 15 of The Fighter Pilot Professor. I am your host, Meta, and today we're going to be talking about the anniversary of Iwo Jima and how to delegate, how to learn to delegate is maybe the best way to put it when you become the person that needs to do some delegating. So I hope you enjoy and we'll dive right in. All right, so today, the day that I'm recording this, I should say, not the day that maybe you'll read this, but today is the anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima. And I'm not going to talk so much about the Battle of Iwo Jima, besides, it was a famous battle for its grueling and devastating or high casualty rate for the Marines who conducted it, and also it famously produced this picture of Marines hoisting the American flag, which, by the way, this was the second attempt. The picture is actually the second attempt of the flag raising, but nevertheless. Ironically, though, the Battle of Iwo Jima really should have never taken place for a number of reasons. And the biggest reason why that it should have never taken place was because it was not actually originally part of the Allied plan to defeat Japan in the Pacific. Originally, as you can see on this map here, the Allies planned to go through New Guinea, up through the Philippines, and into Hong Kong, and then from there jump across either to Taiwan or Korea and into mainland Japan. So using Hong Kong, by the way, British protectorate, or British colony, I should say, the plan was to kind of go the long way around. But, as you can see here on this map, after essentially 2 years of fighting, very little progress was made. So they changed the plan. And this is where the island hopping campaign was really born. And the U.S. essentially jumped the Pacific through a series of islands and bypassed large garrisons of Japanese forces on these various islands. And one of the first main places they went was the Marianas, a collection of islands, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, mainly in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That then served as a jumping off point for the next part of the invasions, which were Iwo Jima and then Okinawa. And then eventually the plan was on to Japan, the homeland of Japan, from there. One of the other things that drove the need to conduct the operation in Iwo Jima, beyond it serving as a next stop in the island chain from Central Pacific to the Japanese homeland, was when the U.S. took the Marianas Islands, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, this enabled B-29 operations. So in late 1944, the U.S. Army Air Force was able to begin B-29 bombing of the Japanese mainland, which had really not been accomplished since the Doolittle raid shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor. So this enabled this new long-range bomber enabled the U.S. to now directly attack the Japanese mainland like they'd been doing with Germany over the past couple of years. The problem is that it was a long, long way from Tinian to mainland Japan and back, right? Roughly the equivalent of New York to London. It's a long way, right? And so, as a result, a lot of B-29s and B-29 crews were lost due to battle damage or etc. Attacking Japan. And so we needed another place for them to stop in case of an emergency. And so Iwo Jima became the next likely stop. So that was the second main reason why the Battle of Iwo Jima took place, even though it was never really slated to be an original. It was never really slated to be part of the original plan to defeat Japan. So in the end, became a divert base for B-29s. It also became a fighter base for escorts, and then eventually Okinawa served that purpose as well. And then, of course, the war ended after the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs. So there you go. That's how we came to get the Battle of Iwo Jima on today's anniversary. Hope you enjoyed. All right. So one of the things that people ask me a lot about is how do you learn to delegate, right? And I'm not going to lie, learning to delegate is a skill that rising leaders and need to learn, but it's really more challenging than we initially imagine it, right? It's more than just say, hey, go do that, right? It's actually delegating is actually really empowering your subordinates to do jobs instead of you having to oversee the doing of that job even, right? And the reason why often delegation is challenging, in my opinion, is because usually we get to be in positions of leadership because we are proficient at our jobs. In other words, in the fighter pilot world, we say you are tactically proficient. And so your tactical proficiency then leads you to get opportunities for leadership, and then that grows your little bubble of leadership to bigger and bigger and bigger things. And eventually you get in control of larger organizations where you can no longer be the person doing the individual tactical things, as it were, right? And this happens a lot, I think, in large corporate organizations as well, where somebody who is a smart computer mind, for example, like Elon Musk maybe, or maybe an engineer, etc., right? They are good at coding or building or finance or whatever it is they're good at, right? And they grow this business, and suddenly this business has grown to this huge organization, and now they've hired all these people that work for them, and they have to learn how to delegate. So how do you do that? How do you learn to delegate, right? And like I said, it's bigger than just handing somebody a task and saying, go do this, right? It's actually empowering people to do the jobs. And that's, I think, the easiest way to think about it is when you get to a certain level of leadership, it no longer becomes telling people what to do, but empowering people to do the thing, the vision, execute the vision that you have as a leader, right? And so what that means to begin with is you have to define your vision as a leader, right? So lay out what it is you see the goals are for your organization, whether it's a big organization or a relatively small one. Even if you just have a handful of people working for you, you can do this. And then from there, right, you sort of build the parameters for how you want that vision executed, right? So in military strategy speak, we call it the ends, ways, and means. The ends are the objectives. The ways and means are sort of the paths that we're going to travel upon, and the resources that we're going to use to travel those paths, if you want to think of it that way, right? And so this ends, ways, and means, now you are providing them either directly, like, hey, I'm going to give you this budget money, or I'm going to give you these people, or you're telling them sort of your vision for how you want something to be executed, right? I would like this particular project to go in this sort of way, and this is what I want the end result to be, right? You can also do this in much broader strokes with just sort of a vision for where you would like the company to go or the organization to go, depending exactly on how you're organized or what you're trying to do, right? And it could be these broad, very large sweeping things like, we are going to change the world because we're going to be the best, right? And then you just empower your people through stuff and ideas on how to get there, and then they create the ways of doing it all on their own, right? And so that's kind of the first step in delegation. The second step in delegation is making sure that you then sort of check in, right, with your people. And you're not micromanaging them, right? But kind of giving them milestones along the way to what does done look like when I get there, right? There's lots of theories and concepts on how to do this kind of stuff, right? But I need to make sure that, hey, they're following my vision for what I think the company or the organization is trying to do. And hey, by the way, when they're doing this thing, they might hit obstacles that you don't anticipate. They might come up with new things that you hadn't even thought of, right? And so these check-ins are not just something that allows you to sort of put the guardrails on, right? It also allows them to provide feedback to you and say, hey, this is way harder than we thought. We need something else, or this problem exists and we can't take care of it. We need you as the big leader to be able to help us do that, right? And then also maybe, hey, they've come up with some really unique exquisite solution to a problem, right? And that problem can help you solve other problems, and you didn't even know about it unless you're checking in with them, right? So checking in and updating the progress of these things that you've delegated to them is sort of part of the process. It gives a way of two-way for feedback, right? So that's just a short little, one little small piece of how to learn to delegate, right? Like, sit down with your folks and lay out your vision. Write it out if you have to. It helps me. I actually write down my visions for what I want organizations to do, right? And then check in with your folks from time to time and see how they're doing. And maybe they'll surprise you and they'll do something amazing and create something wholly new that you weren't expecting. Hope that helps. Hope you enjoyed, and keep submitting your questions. All right, so that wraps it up. Episode 15 in the books, as it were. Keep firing your questions my way. Hopefully you now know a little more about why we went to Iwo Jima in the first place, and how you might begin to learn to delegate responsibility to the people that work for you. Okay? I hope you have a good one, and talk to you soon.